Right? Please rise. 请起立. We bow to the Buddha 3 times. First bow, second bow, and third bow. 好，阿弥陀佛. Please be seated. 请坐. You please join your palms. Together we recite Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. All right, 请放掌. This is where we are in the Amida Sutra, talking about the difficult task that Shakyamuni Buddha had achieved. And that's what we left off. And I would like to talk about, in terms of difficulties, about the difficult path and the easy path. In Nagarjuna, he identifies 2 paths of practice. One is path of difficult practice. The other is the path of easy practice. And when I did this research, it came to my realizations that there are actually 2 easy paths. One belongs to Hinayana, 小乘, tiểu thừa, and the other one belongs to Mahayana, 大乘, 大thừa. So it's kind of interesting to observe the differences between the 2. In his book, the 9th chapter of the Discourse on the 10 Stages, there was a question about the easy path. And this is to illustrate the misunderstanding of the easy path. The description is accurate, but the intention here is wrong. And that's why Nagarjuna, in his reply, was not very in favor of the questioner. But the questioner talks about recognizes that there are difficulties with the Bodhisattva's ideal to achieve non-retrogression, 不退转, 不退转. And the questioner recognizes that, yes, while some are trying to achieve the state of non-regression or the Bodhisattva way, some will fall back to individual liberation, to their own individual emancipation. In other words, they fall back to Shravaka, Shenwen, Tanvang, or the private Buddha, Pichifo, Bichifo. The questioner uses another document called Aids to Realizing Bodhi. That, of course, this is all very true about one pursuing the Bodhisattva ideal. Because once you have this seed of the Bodhisattva ideal, like you observe the Bodhisattva precepts, the Bodhisattva seed is in you and it cannot be destroyed. Even if you have fallen to the realm of hell, there shouldn't be any fear because you will not be stuck in the realm of hell forever. It's not perpetual. But eventually you'll be able to achieve Buddhahood. So that is very encouraging to understand that one observes the Bodhisattva ideal, even though it is difficult to achieve. And you may traverse thousands of, go through a long period of time, but you will not lose that Bodhisattva seed. Even if you were to fall down in the realms of hell, that seed is still there, and one day you will be able to achieve your Buddhahood. He gave an example where just like a man who is strongly attached to his life will be greatly terrified if he is to be beheaded. If he is attached to his life and his belonging, his possessions are to be lost, he will be very worried. Just as a Bodhisattva who has been inspired to pursue the the goal of Buddhahood, he will be very afraid to lose that and fall back into the Hinayana kind of attitude. And so the question to ask is, given the difficulties, is there an easy path? Is there a path of easy practice to achieve the state of non-retrogression? So Nagarjuna, in his book, he answered that yes, there is, but he kind of reprimands this questioner for being weak and coward, because this person is trying to get an easy way out. He wants an easy way to reach his goal, Buddhahood, without putting any effort. So he's saying, yes, the Bodhisattva ideal is very difficult. So is there another way that I can easily achieve it? It's not the question that's the problem. Here is the problem of an attitude and the intention of trying to realize the easy path. And that is the wrong idea of seeking the easy path, is that you want to have an easy time in achieving it, because there is no aspirations in that pursuit. So when I did this research, I realized that there were two paths of easy practice. One belonged to the Hinayana, the other one belonged to the Mahayana. In the Hinayana, there is an attitude. When we say Hinayana, we should really refer to an attitude, not a person, not a method of study. In Hinayana, there is recognition of Bodhisattva ideal. But to them, it is very challenging. Anybody has this kind of attitude, they recognize that there is a Bodhisattva ideal, but it is very challenging because they have to, the vow is to save all sentient beings. So in Hinayana, Bodhisattva ideal does exist, but it is an exception rather than the rule. So we shouldn't say that Hinayana has no Bodhisattva ideal. They do recognize the ideal. It's just that they don't put emphasis on it. And if one is to take this Bodhisattva ideal seriously, one will realize that this Bodhisattva ideal is extremely challenging. And after arising of Bodhisattva, he realizes the magnitude of the task, and he is overwhelmed by his own inadequacy. He feels that he is not capable enough to live up to that ideal. He may become depressed, dispirited, and afraid. And of course, his way of getting out of that is to seek individual liberation. So that is one easy path from the Hinayana perspective. Does it make sense? Right? That's one easy path, is that he falls back to the individual liberation, for his own liberation, because it's so difficult to help others. Even the feel of compassion for the few people around him is very difficult to handle, let alone all sentient beings. So this can be very overwhelming. And so from the Hinayana perspective, taking the easy path is to fall back to individualism, a sense of liberation. Mahayana attitude is different. Mahayana, trying to be on the easy path, is to leverage the other power, the power of the Buddha, the power of bodhisattvas, so that they can be close to Buddhas and peer bodhisattvas. In other words, they are leveraging other power to be close to those who they aspire to become. Does it make sense? Right? So that's a main difference between Hinayana's attitude in trying to seek easy path versus Mahayana trying to seek the easy path. Mahayana trying to seek the easy path in order to achieve irreversibility, 不退转, 不退转, by realizing that Nirvana and samsara are equally void, and there is nothing between them, and so therefore there's no choosing, there's no preference. Hinayana, they depend on no self in order to achieve nirvana. Their primary focus is to achieve the state of no self. In order for them to achieve non-retrogression. For example, there are 3 fetters that they need to achieve. One is no self-view. Eliminate the view that the self exists. And the other is to eliminate doubt. And the third is that to not be attached to rules and religious observances, and to not take them as ends in themselves. So those are the 3 fetters that one needs to break in order to achieve to enter the stream, so that they will not regress. Said in a different way, in order to enter the stream, one needs to have realized some sort of no self. So in Hinayana, their emphasis is no self. In Mahayana, though, the emphasis is on void. 空境, 空单. They focus more on void to achieve non-retrogression. And at this point, when we talk about regression, falling back, it's not about falling back from spiritual life, but falling back from individual liberation. In other words, they are no longer in the danger of falling back into the 3 lower realms because they achieve non-retrogression. But this is falling back in your attitude in trying to save all sentient beings. And they don't want to fall back in giving up the goal of enlightenment for all sentient beings. Right? So Mahayana's attitude and irreversibility is not to fall back to individual emancipation, individual liberation, but to continue with the goal for the sake of all sentient beings. Because to them, how can a bodhisattva not fall back? By realizing that there is no difference between nirvana and samsara, and that as long as you make a decision between you want to be in nirvana or you want to be in such a samsara, it's just a discrimination of the mind. 分别心, 当分别, right? In the highest sense, there is no difference between nirvana and samsara. And therefore, they abandoned the desire really to be in nirvana for their own liberation. For example, they see a mirage. It's a city mirage. They know it is mirage, so there's no desire to hurry up to get to mirage, like in the desert, because they know it's a mirage. Irreversible bodhisattva cannot be tempted by the nirvana of the Hinayana because for him it does not exist. There is no discrimination between samsara and nirvana because ultimately everything is sunyata, 空性, 空单. Mahayana uses the concepts of sunyata in order to remedy the attachment to no self. In Hinayana, there is attachment to no self. So, from this perspective, that Nagarjuna encourages the practitioner to be diligent towards his or her own goals night and day, as if he was putting out a fire on his head. And if we read further in the Age to Realizing Bodhi, it says that as long as you have not entered the state of non-retrogression, then you should continue to strive and be diligent, putting out as if you are putting out fire on your head. And if one can carry the burden, can tolerate the challenges and the burdens in pursuit of Bodhi, then one should continue to strive for it and be diligent. So if one can do it, then one should do it. And he says here, don't be indolent, don't be lazy spiritually. Right? So there is often a misunderstanding that Sharavaka and the private Buddhas, they want to achieve this individual liberation, that they fall back and they take the easy way out. But it's not really from our perspective. Maybe from the Bodhisattvas, Buddhas, that they are lower. But to us, we are like little ants in front of this big mountain. In the book, it says that even Shravaka, Shanwen, Tanvang, and private Buddha, they are also very diligent towards their own goals. So we shouldn't, based on this from the Bodhisattva perspective, that we should criticize them, because they are very diligent compared to us. Because Bodhisattvas are much more in carrying themselves and others towards the other shore, but they are able to carry themselves only. Even though they can carry themselves only, they are very diligent in doing that. So we're talking about spiritual achievements that are way above our level. Sharavaka and the private Buddhas, they are extremely diligent to have had such achievements, because they are sages. Compared to us, we are mundane beings. They are sages. But we learn about this not to criticize their achievement, but really to appreciate the difficulties and to motivate us that we should never stop our diligence, never stop pursue for the highest goal. The reason is that because we want to prepare ourselves spiritually and mentally, that Buddhahood is a task harder than lifting the whole universe, the Buddha says. So it's not an easy task. To become a Buddha, one has to be tested in the 5 turbiddities. 五浊恶世, right? 五浊恶体. And also to achieve the 10 perfections. 十波罗蜜, 十波罗蜜, Tabalama. And the Buddha is said to have 32 beauties. And each beauty takes hundreds of lifetimes to cultivate, to refine. So to achieve a Buddha, to become a Buddha, one has to overcome all sorts of difficulties and challenges over a long period of time. And that's why the Buddha say that it is even more difficult than lifting the whole universe. So having explained that, Nagarjuna says, well, if you're curious about the easy path, then I will explain to you. So he gave an analogy that an easy path, a difficult path is one who travels to the goal by foot and by land. It's very extraneous, very difficult. But a person who is on the easy path is like a person who is on a boat, just rolling towards the goal, the destination. It's much more pleasant than traveling on foot by land, which is full of hardship. But he cautioned to say that we have to be careful that we don't lose our aspiration, that we just completely rely on others. I think it's misleading to give an analogy that you just need to jump onto the boat and then the current will just take you to the destination without needing to put in any effort. So that is a good analogy to make a point, because it has to be extreme to make a point. But with any analogy, it is never complete. So we should understand the analogy that yes, we are leveraging the Buddha's power, other power, tali. It's much easier than our own ability, our own power. But when the reason that we want to leverage the Buddha's ability is to be close to them, so that we can study from them, so that it keeps our aspiration alive. 常随佛学 right? thường tùy Phật học. It's to be close to them so that we can leverage their assistance, not that we don't put in any effort. And then the text, in this text of Nagarjuna, Longshu Pusa, he describes the Buddhas, he lists the Buddhas from different quarters of the universe, and that how, depend on one's aspiration, that one should chant the name of the Buddha to be near the Buddha, to be reborn in that universe, so that one can be close to the Buddha. Just as with Amitabha and Sukhavati, that we chant Amitabha so that we can be close to Amitabha, so that we can achieve our Buddhahood at a quicker pace than our own effort. Right? So we visualize the Buddha's merits, the Buddha's virtues, and then we inspire ourselves to become like the Buddha. And one main difference that Nagarjuna, Longshu Pusa, Long Tao Bồ says in his book is that the easy path, the easy practice is based on faith. Now we should understand this a little bit more, because the word faith is a fully loaded word that can lead to misunderstanding. So what is faith? Faith is not just like blind belief that you put your your life in somebody's hand and then they take care of it for you. That's not what it means here. So it's not a sense of acceptance, and it's not really a feeling, but it's a kind of a mental event, kind of aspiration for the highest spiritual values. That you have a deep feeling inside you that there is something that's truly valuable that can help you, that can be worthwhile for you to pursue. So there's some sort of a trust, right? Some sort of reliance that it can help you to solve your problems. That's why you have faith in it. So it's not belief that you're hoping that it can help you, but you have at least have some intuition that it can help you. It can resolve your problem. So you recognize that you're in this predicament, in this samsara, sopo, taba, thế giới. You're in this predicament and you're trying to find your way out. And when you have found a solution to that problem, then you will feel motivated to resolve it, to reach your goal. So when you know that it's going to work, and if you push it a little more, you start to see results. You start to see the difficulty has eased off, and that you feel that the problem is beginning to resolve. And therefore, you have trust in that. And so you push it a little bit more, and you realize that more difficulty is being resolved. So the reason that we have faith in the three Jews is because we understand that the three Jews represent the highest spiritual values. And in Buddhism, it uses three Jews to have this representation of something of high value. For example, like wealth. Wealth is precious because it can help resolve poverty. But only if you can recognize wealth. Not just because you have money that you can resolve poverty. Right? There are people who have lots of money, but yet they have not resolved their problems. So only when you can recognize the value of wealth will you be able to resolve your problem, or even or intelligence. Intelligence is precious because it helps to resolve stupidity. And friendship is precious because it helps to resolve loneliness. Right? Fearlessness is precious because it helps to resolve fear and it gives us confidence. So we feel at ease. So whatever that helps us to resolve problems, it is precious. The three jewels are precious because they can help us resolve the biggest problems, which is to be liberated from the cycle of life and death, to give us some sense of a control, to give us control of our destination. Once you have been liberated from the cycle of life and death, then you have that sense of control. And that is why the three jewels are precious. But because we have this joy in finding a solution, it does not necessarily mean it's faith. So when we have this aspiration for something higher, we will be tested. And these tests are very necessary because we don't want to be wasting our time. We don't want to wait until the end of our lives to find out that our joy, it just has been a mundane joy. So it is fortunate that we should see it from that perspective, that when we have this very strong faith in something, that we have this test of faith, just like a goldsmith testing gold. Right? You want to make sure that what you have is real gold, not at the time when you need to trade for that piece of nugget that it turns out to be fake gold, then it's worth nothing. Then you will be in deep trouble, right? We don't want to be in deep trouble. We want to make sure as soon as possible that what we have is truly gold, not some metal nugget. What is this test of faith? The test of faith is that in order for us to have true faith, that it should be unconditioned. It should, and in the absence of any kind of gratification or joy, even though there's no pleasure, no spiritual pleasure at all to fall back on, we still have that faith. That we don't fall back, we don't give up, we don't become dispirited, we don't come overwhelmed with sorrow, that we lose our faith. Because that joy, that if we were to lose that faith because our joy, we have lost our joy, then that faith is not true faith. It's just that something on the outside that has triggered that joy. It's not true faith. True faith should be able to sustain one's joy and one's practice. So whether you are in the midst of misery or in the midst of joy, it makes no difference to your faith because you see it very clearly. Just like you see your goal, your destination. Whether you are traveling by foot or by car, by an airplane, it makes no difference. You want to be there, right? So if car is not available, you walk. Let's say you want to walk across the street to the store. If nobody goes with you, it makes no difference whether people are going with you or not because your desire is to get to the store. You see it very clearly, it exists. It's not that if nobody walks with you that there's no store. Right? So faith should be able to sustain one's interest and one's practice and one's motivation, and that is true faith. That we have really found a true nugget of gold. And that is very precious because it can help us to overcome difficulties. Because anything that's precious can help us to overcome difficulty. For example, like Milarepa, he was tested by his teacher, his guru, who told him to build towers and knock him down again and again a couple of times. So he spent a lot of effort building up something and then just to have that building knocked down. So from this, we can understand a little bit deeper that, yes, we put in a lot of effort in establishing a career, a family, life. But sometimes those are not necessarily the goal in life, but there's something behind it that's even of higher value. Because if it was the true goal in life to be successful in life, for example, then in the face of failure, then that's it. You are completely a failure, right? But in our failure, in the midst of our failures, that we learn something about it, we improve it, and we try it again and again and again until we are truly successful. So that the failures and success are not true failure and success. They're not true failures, they're not true successes, but they are expediencies, 方便, phương tiện. They are expediencies for us to realize something greater. So true joy should come from within, and it's very strong and it's very pure. Another example, and I told you this before, was the story of Saint Francis. Right? He was walking, he gave an example that imagine you're walking at night and it's cold, it's raining, and you haven't eaten anything for 2 days. So you're hungry and you're thirsty. And from afar, you see a house with smoke coming out of it and some light. So you know that somebody's cooking dinner. You go to the door, and the owner opens the door, see all your ragged, robes and all your dirty face, and they slam the doors in your face and tell you to get lost. So at that point, Saint Francis says that he feels very happy because he has realized something very joyful than somebody treating him nice. So his joy is beyond mundane joy. We, as mundane beings, we are joyful because we have good company, right? People are nice to us. We have things that we want in a comfort. But what if those things are taken away from us and we are presented with miseries? Will we still be able to have that aspiration to continue? If we can say, yes, I know it's difficult, but I can still see my goal and I'm not giving up, then that is true faith. But if we say, well, everybody's running the other way, I might as well go the other way, then that joy is not true faith, right? So there is joy in faith, but we should not be misled by the worldly joy. We should be able to distinguish between faith that is based on joy that is based on faith, and worldly joy. Because this can be easily confused. Just because you are enjoying something, it doesn't mean that it is based on faith, right? It comes from faith. Therefore, 4 possibilities. One is that you like something, but you don't trust it. The second is that you trust it, but you don't like it. A third is that both, you like it and you trust it. And the fourth possibility is that neither. You neither like it nor trust it. So the first possibility is that even though you enjoy the world, but you don't trust it, you reserve your faith or your trust for the source of one's highest levels. For example, we can go out and enjoy a nice car. You should go shopping for nice clothes, but you don't put your faith in those things. Because if those things go away, then you don't get dragged along. But you put your faith, your whole being in the 3 jewels, for example. That even though those things, for example, a person who has who belongs to this first group or category is that no matter what happens, he or she maintains a meaningful life. Whether there is joy or not, it maintains a meaningful life. So just because there's joy, that he should be corrupted, right? So maintaining a pure and meaningful life. The second is that you trust without liking it. For example, like the law of karma. You believe in the law of karma. You believe that if you do something bad, you will face retribution. But you don't like the retributions. You don't like the consequences. So that's another example. Or in the case of Milarepa, he didn't like about his future birth because he learned black magic and he caused harms and sufferings on others. So he knew that he was going to be born in hell if he did not resolve those evil karmas in this life. So because of that, it motivated him to cultivate spiritually. So because of the implications of his future rebirth, that he didn't like it, but he trusted the law of karma. Does it make sense? Okay. Or in the case of what we just talked about was the Bodhisattva ideal. We are aspires to become Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but we know it's difficult. So that part we don't like it very much, but we trust that within the realm of possibility that we can achieve Buddhahood. The third category is both liking and trust, and this is where real progress shows itself. We are happy to trust in the law of karma, but we also rejoice in the merit arising from skillful actions. So the more that you practice, the difficulties that you have overcome, you start to realize the joy behind it. Now, that joy is not conditional, but that joy springs from your inner self, that you start to realize, I'm on the right path. When you realize that I'm on the right path and you have overcome the distractions along the way, then it gives you inspiration that you are on the right path. So you like the path that you're on, and you don't mind the difficulties because you know that the next difficulties will come, and you overcome the difficulties. You know that you will have more inspiration. Right? So you like the positive results. You rejoice in the merit of your accomplishments. Even though it's difficulty and demanding, but you like it and you trust the path that you are on. Does it make sense? So this is real progress. We want to be in this state, that we realize the benefits of our progress, of our cultivations, and we don't mind the difficulties. We don't mind the demanding practice. So faith involves a genuine appreciation of and trust in one's spiritual friends as spiritual friends. So we appreciate the spiritual environment that has helped us to overcome difficulties. The fourth case is neither liking nor trust. There is neither liking nor trust. That means that all avenues towards happiness of any kind seem closed. And the result is a state of anger and frustration, where you don't like what you're doing and you don't trust it. It's a very frustrating state to be in. Faith is very precious because it is indispensable, and it allows us to clear up the distractions and allows us to gain insight into the nature of reality. But it doesn't mean that we just plunge into the darkness optimistically. It's not like this is not blind faith, but there is a degree of certainty and a degree of knowledge. We may not see the entire truth. We may not have realized our goal, but there is some certainty, some knowledge that it is within the realm of the possibility. And we should not confuse it with simply feeling very good about spiritual life. Again, this is not just a good feeling. A good feeling is not primary but secondary. When you have the inspiration, you know that you're on the right path. It gives a sense of security. You have a sense of security and a sense of joy, and that joy is the byproduct of your faith, that you are not distracted by the uncertainty, by doubts, but you feel pretty good about where you are, and you know that if you continue to make progress, you will make progress and you won't fall off the cliff. There is some doubt that when we have doubt, we don't know if we continue further that we're going to fall off the cliff. But there is some degree of certainty that we continue, we will not fall off the cliff. Another way of looking at faith is that faith is an action, very weighty karmic action, very weighty karma. When we say weighty karma, that means that there is focus, intention behind it. And faith is action, faith is action is because one is not being not just being hopeful about for rescue, but one takes actions to ensure that rescue. Right? So it's not just wishful thinking, but there is intention and action behind it. So weighty karma is, when you have weighty karma, that means you have intense focus and energy on the deed. You really mean to do it. In meditation, if you just sit there and you feel good about it, it's not considered as weighty karma. But if you sit in meditation with intense focus and it leads to insight, then that is weighty karma. So weighty karma has to be something that transforms your consciousness. So it's not just emotional, but it has to be transformational to become weighty karma. If we want to have weighty karma in our rebirth in Sukhavati, it is not just about chanting Amitabha and not understand what it means. But there should be intense focus, and also there should be understanding of what Amitabha is. And what does it mean to be reborn in Sukhavati? And what does it mean to become a Buddha? So those things have to be very clear in our mind in order to have weighty karma, because it gives us momentum, psychological, emotional, spiritual momentum. Because if we do without understanding clearly, then it does not become weighty karma. But faith is more than just weighty karma. It has to be transcendental. In other words, it has to lead to insight towards liberation. Right? So it's not just about feeling good, but it's about the joy that is the result, is a byproduct of your cultivation. So we just talked about what is faith. What faith is faith. There is some degree of certainty and knowledge, and that you have intention behind it. So what is the state of no faith or lack of trust in this case, non-faith. So it helps us to compare so that we can see the differences between faith, which is true faith is unconditional, not based on any kind of worldly joy, but the joy is a byproduct of faith, not the other way around. And it helps to understand the state of being that lacks trust or faith. A person lack of trust or faith has no deep conviction, no desire for positive things, and that provides the basis for laziness. Faith is not just simply the absence of, or non-faith is not just simply the absence of faith, but I think it's more dangerous here that it deprives a person from motivating himself or herself for something that's positive, to realize the positive mental states. And that person has no appreciation of the value of those positive things, and that's why he's not motivated to achieve those things. And because he has no definite drive in their directions or clear volitions to realize those positive things. He doesn't appreciate that actions have consequences, and he does not clearly define skillfulness and unskillfulness. So as a result, he may not be able to avoid skillfulness, be able to avoid unskillfulness. So if we don't understand the value of the three Jews, we won't be able to commit ourselves to the three Jews, and we won't go for refuge to them. Because we don't see the value, we don't see how they can help solve our problems. Therefore, we don't put ourselves, commit ourselves to those, the three Jews. And without faith in the transcendental, without faith in the possibility of enlightenment, we are not going to be interested in them. So faith is an important element to give us that spiritual momentum. And the lack of faith is the link between dullness, in the sense of not appreciating what the Dharma really means, and laziness in the sense of not practicing the Dharma. Right? So we don't appreciate what it means and we don't know how it can help our problem, then we will lose interest in pursuing them. And we won't be able to commit ourselves to the practice because we see no value in it. So the lack of faith is spiritually dangerous. Faith is a very precise mental event. And it's kind of emotion because there's joy associated with it. So there is emotion, an element of emotion, but it's unique and it's rare. It's not our emotion of pleasure or pain. Not that kind of emotion. But there's some sort of emotion, appreciation for the value of the things that we aspire to achieve. One may be affected, moved, and inspired by one's experience of Buddhism, but this does not necessarily amount to faith. So that's why, again, we have to differentiate between joy that is based on faith versus the worldly joy. So one may appreciate its positive effect on one's mental state, but faith is more than just joy, right? Just because you feel joy, that's why that doesn't amount to faith. So that's why we have to go through tests just to make sure that what we have is truly 100% genuine. Faith produces inner joy, and it's independent of conditions. And faith should lead us to resolve an action. So not just wishful thinking, but there needs to be a motivation behind it. So when we talk about the path of easy practice, it's not just to jump onto a boat and have the current carry us to our destination, but there is some motivation, there is some sincerity in wanting to get to a destination. So we should avoid distractions in order to have this clear purpose of what is it that we want to achieve. One is distracted by the opinions of others as to what the practice Buddhism means. And the reason one is distracted is because one is not being firm enough in one's purpose. Right? We rush off and to find new method. We don't give it enough time to take effect, to sink in and to take effect. But we quickly rush off to find a new way to practice because we have not seen the results yet. So we should be patient and give some time for it to come, to take effect. Distraction comes from lack of confidence. We don't trust in ourselves. We want to find that quick fix. We want to find that quick solution, and when we cling to the idea that if we can just find the right method, then all difficulties would be over. That we don't have to face difficulties anymore. So that's why people jump from practice to practice because they think that something else on the outside can solve the obstructions on the inside, the mental obstructions, the spiritual obstructions. They think that there will be some magical powers out there that can resolve those inner obstructions. And that is a sign of lack of confidence. So this is equivalent to finding an easy way out. Right? We face difficulties, but we fall back and we don't want to encounter the difficulties. So instead of jumping around to find the magic solution, one should try to be more receptive to the practice at hand. Give it a try. Give it time to sink in. So how do we become more spiritually receptive? Well, we can start with prayers. We shouldn't, for us, we are not too afraid of prayers. But perhaps for the Westerners, they associate praying to theism, where they pray to God, for example. So this the notion of prayer does not necessarily have theistic connotations. So how do we have prayers? How do we utilize prayers? What will be the appropriate way to utilize prayers? How should we see prayers? We should see prayers as aspirations. When we pray to the Buddha, not because we want material things, although people do pray for material things, they pray to the Buddhas for wealth, to win a lottery, to help their children pass exams. Those are worldly things. When we pray to the Buddha, we are aspiring for something that's higher than ourselves. Not for material things, but for blessings, for higher understanding, for wisdom, and for compassion. Because we recognize that we don't have those things to the level that we want, and we are aspire to achieve those things. That's why we pray to the Buddha. We know that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have the wisdom and compassion, and therefore we have this aspiration to develop wisdom and compassion as they do, but in the form of a request. So when we pray, we are making a request to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Not a request for material things, but the request for something that's more meaningful. Request for abilities to do the hard work that sentient beings cannot. So we use the language of petition because it compels us to think of wisdom and compassion as qualities that can be acquired. Of course, we know in our mind that the Buddha cannot just give us a compassion and wisdom. It's not like they can open our brains and download compassion and wisdom. We know that it's not physically that way, but we also realize that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are not different from ourselves. So when we pray to the Buddha, we understand that, yes, I'm praying for something that may seem like external to us, but we are trying to uncover something that's internal. We realize that our being and the Buddha's being, are not different. So when we pray to the Buddha, we are really reminding ourselves to uncover our own wisdom, our own compassion. Does it make sense? Right? So we're trying to activate something that has been laying dormant in us. So we're trying to wake up something in us we already have. And we're reaching out to the Buddha to help us to remind ourselves, to help us to become, to activate our dormant abilities. When we pray to the Buddha, we are asking for help. And we should show our initiation, our sincerity, our that we want to achieve those goals, right? So we should be earnest about it. When we ask for it, we should put in the effort to try the best we can to realize it, right? So it's not enough that we have sincerity in our hearts. And it is a mistake to expect that the rest of the journey should be free of problems. So we have this earnest request, prayer to the Buddha for enlightenment, to become Buddhas ourselves. And just because we have that aspiration, it doesn't mean that the rest of the journey will be trouble-free. Because although it may be true that the most serious obstacles to the proper understanding of Buddhism are those that exist in the student's own mind. But it is a mistake to assume that for this reason that obstacles external to the mind of the student do not exist. Right? Just because we have a clear understanding of what we want, it doesn't mean that there will be no obstructions. You may have the right key, meaning you have the right motive, the right intention, but what if you, and it doesn't mean that when you're trying to open, as you approach the door, that the lock will fly open, the doors will fly open, and that you can just easily walk in, right? So when we talk about easy path, it doesn't mean that we rely on the Buddha, we pray to the Buddhas, Amitabha, and that the rest of the journey will be free of troubles. Because what if we stand at the wrong door? Even when we have the right key, what if we stand at the wrong door, or we try to insert the right key into the wrong lock? It will not open. So what are these obstacles that we should be mindful of? We should be mindful of the obstacles of mere intellectual understanding. The obstacles are not unrelated to merely intellectual, scientific, or non-traditional approach to the study of Buddhism. Scientifically trained scholars not only conduct researches into Buddhism, but also publish the results. And generally, for a long time, the sole sources of knowledge available to the students have been those publications. Right? We find a lot on the internet. We find a lot of books published about Buddhism. But we should be careful. We're not saying, we're not predisposing to, we're not saying that these publications have no value. But as long as we recognize the limitations of scientific method, then we then we then we will suffer little positive harm. So we're not criticizing or trivializing scholarly works, but we should recognize that there are limitations. So the obstacle here is that we should understand that when we interact, when we absorb things, that we don't take them literally at face value, but we should just judge, make sure that they resonate with our own goals. So the Buddha knew that it was not possible for a common man to realize the Buddha's ideal. And that's why he created this Sangha, the spiritual community. An ideal society. So he essentially created an ideal society for the practitioners. So we should not just simply admire, but we should try to imitate by observing the precepts. By creating this environment that is more conducive to the practice and the realization of the ideal. There are different degrees in realization because people have different abilities, different levels of understanding. So the difficult path that we've been comparing difficult path and the easy path. The difficult path is, the reason the path is difficult is because there is a possibility of getting lost in intellectual understanding and have no spiritual satisfaction, and that there is no spiritual progress made. Right? So at the end, one continues to be stuck in the cycle of life and death. And that is the danger to the difficult path. This is not to say that we should avoid all difficulties, but we should recognize that we should leverage other power. And from that perspective, that is relatively easy. But when we say it's easy, it's not really, because we still have to put in our efforts, put in the diligence to realize our goal, as if we are putting out the fires on our heads. Okay, let's summarize what we talked about. Nagarjuna talks about two paths, easy path and a difficult path. The difficult path, you have to go through all kinds of difficulties in the five Tibetides and accomplish the five perfections on your own. The easy path is the easy path is relatively easier because it relies on faith. There, we should understand this clearly. There are two levels of easy path. One is Hinayana attitude, and the other one is Mahayana attitude. Hinayana is that in the arising of bodhicitta, that one becomes overwhelmed with one's inability to help others, and that one becomes depressed, dispirited, and afraid, and that he falls back to the comparatively short and easy path of the individual liberation. Whereas in Mahayana, the easy path is to rely on other power, the powers of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, not because we want to not do work, but because we admire them and we are aspired to become like them, to be close to them so that we can achieve our goal quicker, not because we don't want to put any effort. And the reason we want to be close to them is that we can easily and quickly enter the non-retrogression state of being, and to achieve that state of being, the primary element there is faith. And faith here is not just blind faith, but faith is really an aspiration to be close to those who we aspire to become. And we should understand faith in order to avoid the confusion In faith, there is joy because it allows you to continue your practice. It allows you to understand what the Dharma is, and it allows you to commit to the practice of the Dharma. But we should not confuse faith with the joy that is based on faith and worldly joy. True faith is the ability to generate motivation, and then it comes from within, independent of conditions. Whether there are people walking along with you or not, it makes no difference. And that true faith is to avoid spiritual laziness with respect to positive things and positive developments. Faith-based practice is to leverage other power and to avoid the trap of intellectual understanding and to avoid standing at the wrong door, inserting the right key at the wrong lock. So we should not expect things to be easy just because we have the aspiration, but we should be prepared to overcome difficulties. And the really difficulties are not really difficulties. It is only difficult if you have lost your motivation and that you don't want to put in any effort. So we want to be in a state where we trust it and we like it. And we see the results in our practice. And we trust that with further efforts that we will be able to arrive at our destination. Does it make sense? So the easy path and the difficult path, we should choose the easy path, but we should understand that easy path doesn't mean we don't do any work, but we still put in the effort, but we are leveraging other power, tali, in order to be close to the Buddhas so that we can study with them so that we can keep the aspiration alive. Otherwise, it can be very easy for a person to give rise to bodhicitta and then fall back because he is overwhelmed by his inability to help all sentient beings. Right? But if we are close to the Buddha, we will be able to keep that motivation alive and be able to gain that momentum, and that will prevent us from sliding back, not from spiritual life, but sliding back to individual liberation. Does it make sense? Okay, that is what I would like to share with you, what I want to share with you today. So we will do merit dedication. If you could please join your palms. Together we recite. May the merits and virtues accrued today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the paths below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss.